month's meeting of the finance committee of the school board. Um, we have a relatively short agenda tonight. We can finish the time. Um, we have a motion to approve the agenda. So move and I second that. All in favor? Any abstention? Any opposition of the ayes carried. Item 2.0, approval of the minutes of the provided. We have a motion. So moved. Have a second. All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstention of the ayes carried. So we have two contracts. TNTP. You know.
My name is Cassandra Charles. I'm supervisor of principal support for the district. I just wanted to bring to the finance committee the agenda for TNTP. This contract is unique in the sense that TNTP has been named a sub-grantee within the TSL grant. This is the second time Providence Public Schools has been awarded the TSL grant for the district. So we were awarded it in 2020 for a 3-year period in which TNTP was named a sub-grantee as well. And then we were awarded it again, which began on October 1st. And TNTP was named as a sub-grantee as well. So we wanted to bring this to the school board just so that you were aware of the work throughout the 3 years, which is listed in the town.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The being sub-grantee, can you?
Absolutely. So we worked with TNTP to collaboratively put together the application for the second grant. In the first 3 years of the grant, they worked with us to build up our leadership pipeline, so building our talent from within. They worked with us to provide assistant principal professional development, professional development, build their capacity, and also to support us building our career pathways within the district. This next application, the second application that we work with them on, they will be helping us again to continue that work on building our leadership pipeline. They also supported us in our new school leader evaluation, which was rolled out at the beginning of this year to our school leaders, focusing on the turnaround competencies in the district. And then we'll continue with the assistant principal professional development. We're going to continue with our career compensation pathways to, again, just build our pipeline from within and also create a more robust leadership development program within the district.
And I know you said that we used them in the past from
2020 to 2023, yes.
Okay, so things like this one we have like long term. I think we should be good if we have some performance. These are the things we've done, achievement and everything. So now just like coming here, we're now talking about the next 3 years. It would be better if we also have a little bit of background.
Like data,
maybe just like something. I know the reason why you're continuing this is because of the good work, but it would be good if we have it. This to me is it's vague. It's not as detailed as what with the amount of money we're talking about $5 million. So I think it would be good if you okay, this is what we've done. And this is not the first time we're doing this, but at the same time, if we know it will give us some confidence that okay, yes, we're not explaining much. And the other question I have to ask is, for the first 3 years, how much is what?
for the first 3 years of the grant.
For how much was TNTP?
Yes.
For the first 3 years.
Like the past 3 years, that was not. Sorry, not for a second.
Yeah, they were, so I think it's not mentioned as well. So the first system grant from DOE, TNTP was named as the sub-recipient as well as that grant. So that's why they were named. So the second round as well as sub-recipient. So I will get the dollar amount that we paid them and the dollar amount of the system grant as well.
So when somebody's a subgrantee, what that's the problem. What's how? I mean, I don't want to say that. Can that same company be like on standalone instead of being so? Or is it a condition? Is it
It's
something?
a condition of the award of the grant.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. What's a little unique here is in certain cases we've submitted grants where we apply and then we go out and select the vendor. In this case, we partnered with them to submit the grant. And so when DOE said we're awarding it, it was awarding it to PPSD and
Oh,
TNTP.
I
So
got you.
they were named in it, in part because it would have been awkward to bid with them and then bid like we went in and they were going to be, if we got the grant, great, we didn't.
So, I mean, having them as a submanager helps also get to this grant. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, in part because they've done a lot of this work
Oh,
across the,
okay.
let's see,
We're not spending out of our budget, right?
no,
This is
all,
And that answers my curiosity about the subcommittee and everything. And I think the reason why I want to know what this role that in the process, so I don't know that okay. But since it's a grant, then so,
I think you can correct me, Chris. The number I have is around 5.3 million for the 3 years or about the last bid.
oh, okay. This is 5.1. So we're good with this from October of this year, so September 30th, 2020.
Yes, I just would like to add to it, the reason why you see those dates, because that's a federal grant cycle, not a fiscal year cycle, so that's why you see it start and that follows the grant cycle. All right?
No. You have a motion to recommend this for passage?
motion.
So moved and I said, all in favor? Any abstentions, any oppositions, I ask God. Thank you.
For the first time, you did good.
Thanks for everybody's help.
Sandra.
How did you know it was me?
Second
I
time.
was there, I'm a frequent flyer, I know.
You know that this is an epistle that you provided, right? And it's from you, so we know
It
it's
is,
you.
it's brilliant.
Let's hear it through consulting.
Sure. So Sandy Stewart, Chief of Student Support Services. The contract, the financing reform you see in front of you is for the through consulting. It's not to exceed more than 200,000. The length of this contract, I want to kind of go over that with you because it's a little odd. You'll see it would be from September to October 24. And that's because part of this contract is to fulfill a requirement for our settlement agreement that ends in October 2024, and I'll go over that in a second so you will understand. That's why that time frame is a little later than the school year. And so we have worked with the Through company before. You might remember, I think it was last spring that you had approved. They've been doing some work with us on auditing our pre-K department in order to help us have more efficient systems. Now this contract is solely for monitoring. And let me explain what that means. If you see, there are 3 pieces. We have the summary. I also gave you the scope of work with their letterhead, so that just outlines what the work is that they're going to be doing. And then the last piece that I have is actually, it's a sole source because this is in reference to a settlement agreement that we have. And if you notice on the last page, this was filed in August the 29th. And basically, it names the Through company as the monitor that will help support us. So what does that mean? What it means is if you look on the page 7 at the bottom, we are required by the agreement to submit monthly, the first of every month, the following data to the court to show our progress as far as 2 areas. The number of pre-K evaluations that are being completed, and then the second one is placements. And so you will see on page 7 at the bottom, each month we meet multiple times with Through. They help us to keep track of the data, and then they report out to the court our progress. So they'll report on the number of evaluations, the number of students who have received IEPs, how many students require replacements, and then special ed detailed services on their IEP. So they submit this monthly report each month to the court, and then it also goes to, on page 8, the plaintiffs, which these are the attorneys that we're in the agreement with. So it'll go to them and then also to the judge. So this contract would allow us to keep working with them in order to, because as you can tell, it says here on A that we are responsible for paying for the consultant firm to submit the report. Yeah, and so that's what this contract would be. Now, the reason why I'm coming a little later is because this was very new to us, so we had to work with the group to figure out what that would look like, what the report would look like, because this isn't something we had submitted prior. So once we found that out, that's why we had them put together a scope of work and what that would cost and look like, so that way we could come in and request the contract. So, which is what is here today. So that's why we have the sole source, because they would need an agreement.
So we have run this through our legal department.
Oh, so yes, so the attorney that I work with for all of our special education cases, including this one, which is preschool, is attorney Marianne Carroll. And so she is the one who had negotiated, I don't know if that's the right term, but the agreement with the other plaintiffs with the court. Yeah, we actually had to go a couple of times to discuss and have mediation and come up with the final plan. And this was the result of this. There's a lot of other pieces to this. As a matter of fact, if you're curious, it's on our website. It'll show the actual entire agreement on there. But it pretty much says, that we're going to do not just the monitoring, but we're going to do very specific things in order to support what our goal, which is obviously to increase the number of students having evaluations and making sure that students have placements after those evaluations are done, which is what we report to the court. And then we have to submit some letters and things like that to the families, which we've done all of those pieces. But this is mostly all of the data from within the department around evaluations and placements. That was a very broad explanation for a very lengthy process, but
Under substantial compliance, I see that for each subclass,
yes.
or no more than 10 students. So where we have more than 10 students, what happens?
So we have two subclasses. We have one subclass that is just students who are waiting for long periods of time for the evaluations to be done. So I think, like we've explained a couple times, we were having a really difficult time finding psychologists and speech and language therapists. So that kind of prolonged the evaluation. So that's one subclass. And then we had another subclass of students where we didn't have seats for, who were waiting on actual placement, so actual classrooms. And so we had another subclass of those students. And so those are the two subclasses that we report out each month. And then we also report where our current progress is, so that way we can see where we're currently at.
Okay, so sorry, that was not asking that question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said no more than 10. If we have 10, we have a budget of that we're planning to spend. If we have more than 10, we have less than 10, what will happen in those situations? So if we have we need to do this for more than 10, what happens to the budget? Because we already designed this as 727 hours. So the likelihood of spending more than 727 hours. So in that situation, what happens to our budget?
We won't exceed the 727 hours because it's once a month that we prepare the report. And we took a little extra time in the first couple months only because it was new and we had to figure out how we were going to collect the data, how we were going to report it out. So it took a little time. Now, because we're doing it, I think we've already submitted 2 reports. We're going on our 3rd. We already have the template, so it's just a matter of reviewing the data, submitting it to them, and then they formalize the report. So I don't believe we'll go over. Yeah, we will go over that. And as a matter of fact, part of where one of them, which was the placement, we've been able to place every child, which has been really great. So that number has been 0 for us, which is what we want it to continue to be. And even our evaluations, our numbers are going down. We're having a lot more students being evaluated. So we're definitely seeing progress with all of the, different interventions, the different things that we've been putting into the department so that way we can, we hired additional staff. We've done a lot to really help support that.
So these agreements, another question I this agreement, is it a one-time agreement or we're expecting that coming October 2024, we're going to see all these
I hope not. My goal is no. I mean, we're on the trajectory right now. We're doing, like I said, we have had placements, where the evaluations, we're definitely, for lack of better words, catching up with the evaluation. So absolutely not. My goal is that by October 20, I'm hoping before then, but by this agreement is by 2024, we would have rectified this. And I do feel, as of right now, we're on trajectory of meeting that. Yeah, this was just what they gave us time to be able to do that, which is why it's so up. That's why I asked for this to be October 24, because our last report to the report would be at that time. Because by then, we should be out of the agreement. We would have fulfilled.
Have they started already?
They did.
Can you explain why they started early?
Yeah, so what happened is we had this settled and we didn't get it submitted till the end of August. So one of the things the through has, they were told by the court they had to do this. We had to figure out what's the system that they would use. This is not something usually in their scope of work that they do, but they were willing to help support. They were part of those conversations with us when we were in, with the judge, and they agreed that they would monitor us, but they had to figure out a system of how to help us collect the data, how they were going to monitor. So it took us a little while to figure out what that was going to look like. And it was hard for me to come to you to ask you for money without knowing how much they were going to charge us to do that. So it took them a little time to figure out how much time it would actually take. So we kind of had to go through it first. And so once we did that, that's when they then put together the scope of work, which is this piece, to share what exactly it would, how much time it would take, what it would look like, how much they would charge us. And then that's when I put all this together. So that's why we had to start it sooner and a lot of time.
I'm on page 2.
Which,
Last paragraph, the cost.
the cost, okay?
Yeah, it's explanation.
Yep.
So I want to understand that is putting potentially more than 1 year. We're still, and I have a reason for making sure that we are aligning with this thing. So potentially more than 1 year means that it goes from September to October. That is more than 1 year, or it's going to be beyond October 2023.
I can't answer about the October only because I'm not sure if we're going by what we are now with our trajectory with the number of evaluations. Again, our placements were to be at 0. We're already at 0. So I can't foresee. Again, I hate to say to you, we're going to be totally out. Like, I wish. My goal is to have us obviously out because, in the trajectory that we're in and the data that we're seeing shows that that's the trend we're moving towards. But we have by the court to do that by October, by 2024. And even if we have everything, we still have to submit the reports showing that up until that time. But I hope before then that, we would have rectified all of the different subcap classes.
Is it possible for us to have like an update sometime before October 2024 on this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
in the next 3 months or 6 months to say, this
Sure.
is where we are.
Sure.
So,
What I can do is I can share with you our reports, so that way you can see. So I can show you like our September that we submitted and our October, and that way you can see the actual report that they submit to the court.
I'm more interested in getting closer to the deadline that we have.
Oh, closer to like in the spring.
Yeah, in the
Sure.
spring. So like the next 6 months. So here's where. So at least we'll be comfortable that yes, well, we made it the time.
Sure.
If it's possible.
Of course, that's easy. Sharon, do you want to put as a note that like maybe April or May?
That will be
April or May, and then I could do like a presentation. Does that sound good? Like I could do a presentation on where we're at with this and share the report? Does that sound good?
I hope we're not asking for too much.
No, no. The reports are done. I can go over that with you. That's not a problem.
Okay, the last question. This is preliminary of doing this is virtual. I see a clause in the last line of this one that says if you need to be for travel expenses, is that if it's going to be billed, is that a separate billing or part of this budget?
So it would be part of the budget, but we were doing it all virtual. The only thing that we had is one of the consultants that we've been working with, the court did ask for them to attend as we were going through this whole process over the summer. And so he did come. He did come, I forgot where he lives a little closer, so he did come in person. But the majority of all of the planning, the submission of data, all of that's done virtual. We have 2 meetings to do those, and we submit that.
Because for me, when it says it's going to be billed separately or billed monthly as incurred, so I want to have the understanding that it's coming out of them the entire budget that was set.
I agree, and that's why we've been trying to do it mostly all virtual, because really it's more submission of data, so they don't really, nothing in our agreement says they have to come and do observations. All they're reporting is the actual data of all of the evaluations, all the students we're placing each month. So that's all done through, Zoom meetings. We built the platform so that way we can share that with them, and then we just need to kind of discuss if they have any questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm asking too many.
No, you're not asking a lot of questions.
In the absence, can we recommend this for constituency? I second that. All in favor? Any abstentions? Any oppositions that I have? So we look forward to getting this sometimes when you be able to let us know that we're missing our target.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to put it on my calendar. Yeah.
So the next item is budget focus.
I was gonna leave. Thank you so much. Zach Scott, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, along with DC Executive Director of Finance. And while it's only November, we do want to start conversations about fiscal year 25, the one coming ahead of us. I'll explain why we are focusing on it so early. So flipping to the next slide, what we wanted to share were just some key takeaways that we'll try to hopefully explain in greater detail throughout the deck. But this, I think, will become more, of a national topic of conversation. But the 24-25 budget year is going to be a challenging one for districts across the country. We've been talking with our colleagues over the past few years, but certainly the last few months in other parts of the state and the country. And it is something that is not unique to Providence, but something that everyone's facing. We'll share more about why that is. Because of that, we are starting to plan earlier. So I know we usually come with budget planning more in the spring, but we are starting early because we want to make sure we are planning ahead and planning effectively. We'll talk through just when we look at some of our core expenses, when we think about salaries, service contracts, they tend to grow annually, which which requires us to actively manage our budget, meaning just to kind of maintain the level of service that we provide, we often have to make trade-offs, difficult choices to do that, and certainly when we make investments, it can't be done just by adding. We are making, making trade-offs and decisions that we have to do. What is unique this year, and we'll try to highlight this, is not only do we see the kind of natural cost growth that you would expect for a district, but we have seen significant increases in student need, and particularly in our specialized programs. I think that obviously the pandemic, the literal pandemic is behind us, but much of the impacts of students and student learning is still with us. So that's on the expense side. When we look on our revenue, while state aid is fairly predictable, city aid has been less predictable. That makes some challenges for us how we plan ahead. So taking all that together, we're focusing on how we mitigate any impact to schools, knowing that we will have to make likely some very difficult trade-offs over the coming year, which require proactive. So slide 3 just gives from some national organization that we've worked with or are kind of members of that does this work across the country. And they've highlighted a few things that really come together to make this year a challenging one. Federal grants, ESSER, and we'll probably use that acronym throughout, has been a different round of stimulus funding. The most recent round, the district has fully expended the first 2 rounds. We are now in the final round. But it is a significant amount of funds that are set to expire at the end of this year. We knew that. Much of our planning has been recognizing those are one-time costs. But anytime you have, our district budget is roughly $400 million or $420 million. ESSER was $128 million. So really unprecedented in terms of even the ARPA days under in the early 2000s was nowhere near this amount, right? So just anytime, as well as you can plan, anytime you're transitioning from such a big influx of cash and money, it's always going to, even as you plan for that, it will feel like a reduction. Enrollment declines mean fewer revenues in the long run, and this has been something particularly flagged in urban districts. So our colleagues in Boston, New York, and other places have seen declines in enrollment. And I think some of that relates to just less students coming in during COVID, lower birth rates 5 or 6 years ago, and then in Providence we have seen charter school expansion, which offers other opportunities for students and impacts our enrollment. We also, and this is not true, this is true not just of school districts, but inflation, labor scarcity, and new hiring are driving up costs. So it is more, just like it's more, it costs more to shop at the grocery store, it costs more to attract talent, and inflation has caused things like service contracts to go up as well. Taking all that together creates some financial challenges, and on top of that, that student need has only increased. And again, not just, not solely because of the pandemic, but certainly that has impacted that. So that makes a very challenging year. Slide 4, we thought it was helpful. Some of this is going to be old news and like some things you've learned, seen before. But we want to talk to, when we think of just our normal budget on the revenue and expense side, how do we think about that in terms of projecting for future years? And then what is unique this year that makes that either more or less challenging? So starting on the revenue side, and then we'll walk through these in greater detail. Our biggest drivers here are state aid and city aid. That's our local budget. State aid is roughly 2/3 of our local budget. City aid roughly 1/3. State aid is pretty predictable in that it is directly tied to student enrollment and students experiencing poverty. And as we've seen some enrollment declines, we also have experienced state aid declines in recent years. On city aid, has been some uncertainty. We'll highlight that in a little bit more detail. That makes it frankly harder to not just makes it harder to plan without knowing your kind of expectations for revenue leverage. Unique to this year is what I mentioned, the federal stimulus dollars that will be expiring in September 2024. On the expense side, we have just standard required expenses, salaries, benefits, transportation, utilities, that grow and, on average, somewhere between 2 and 3%, and that natural growth are expenses we then need to cover. And then from that, we may increase, based on enrollment, staffing, enrollment and other things, we would then adjust that up or down, based on student needs. Unique to this year are an unprecedented increase in out-of-district budgets for students with special needs, both due to more students being identified, but also continued shortages of qualified staff, as well as some high-impact student-focused master-funded initiatives that we want to carry forward, presuming we can find it in our budget. So if we start to dive into our expenses a little bit, and on slide 5, thank you. This gives you a high-level breakdown of our budgets in big buckets. So the left is broken down by the UCOA uniform chart of accounts. But maybe the right-hand side is a little more instructive of what really drives our expenses of our budget. So salaries and benefits taken together are roughly 3/4, here 73% of our district's budget. That's pretty typical for school districts, highly focused on staff. I think as a state, our benefits and retirement amount tends to be a little bit higher, but collectively that 75% is in line with most other districts. We also have things like key service contracts from custodial, transportation, our high school students using crypto. That is also a significant portion and really, is fixed in the sense that, minor changes, but they're typically growing and changing by inflation. We also have special education, which is things like non-public tuition and contracted services, and we'll spend a second going there a little deeper because we are seeing some student need and also some cost pressures there for this coming year. And then the remaining 13% includes a lot of things that it takes around this day-to-day, classroom supplies, technology, utilities, facilities expenses. So if you think that big things like salaries and benefits, key service contracts typically grow by inflation. That's roughly 2 to 3% on a roughly $420 million budget. That equates to just a natural expense growth of $8 to $13 million, meaning that just on its own, without making any changes, we would expect to see that level of growth for expenses each year. Here's where we want to show what we're seeing on the student needs side, and it is growth that's really grown historically, but accelerated in recent years. Two groups we want to focus on. The first is on special education, and we're just showing one metric here, which is out-of-district placements. But what you'll see is the percent of students we are placing out of district has increased by 23% since school year 2019-20. And those placements tend to be expensive, and it's typically for students who have pretty severe, and Stuart was here, she could share more, but severe needs that can't always be addressed appropriately within the district. That's compounded by challenges we've faced internally with being able to fully staff our special education classrooms. But we've seen that rise, and that will translate for this coming year to increased expenses related to business. The MLL growth of multilingual learners as a percent of our student body is not something that is a new trend, but if you go back to school year 15, we were roughly 22% of a district, where we are at 38% of all of the students in the district identifying as multilingual learners. We put some points of comparison for other districts, both kind of comparable nearby ones like Worcester, as well as larger ones like New York and Boston. But we far outpace many districts in terms of support for the number percent of multilingual learners we have in it. And we're certainly well above the urban core in Rhode Island as well as the Rhode Island. So certainly as we do that, we need to better, often those students come with additional needs that translate to additional costs in the district across the river. So those are two things that as we, not only we've seen some of our standard cost growth, but we're anticipating growth due to the increase in student needs. To give you a sense of, I mentioned earlier about the need to actively manage our budget. what you'll see here is that this is not just a one-year kind of investment or series of trade-offs, but decisions we made over the course of the past few years that we think were intentional and focused in the areas identified in our turnaround action. So we knew, this preceded certainly me and my time here, but in August of 2018, the district was entered into a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice around our support of multilingual learners. We did not have staff adequately trained or certified to support multilingual learners. Students were not receiving the level of English language development support. There was not adequate professional development. So it was something that was not good for kids, but also that we were required to do under the Settlement Act is to take action and address it. So that led to us focusing much of the district's attention, including how we align our budget. And so over the course of a few years, we made changes to ultimately looking at our secondary, middle, and high school staffing and realizing that we had not been staffed particularly efficiently. We had, frankly, far in many cases, the number of teachers to fill a physical building, but not related, not aligned with the enrollment that had changed over time. So while it was a trade-off, we'd identified additional teaching positions that were reduced, while also reallocating coaches who had previously just been at the elementary level. What that meant were a series of investments that we did with some of those repurposed positions, including adding multilingual learner certified math and literacy coaches across all schools, not just elementary schools, providing teachers with one-time reimbursement to obtain their ESL certification, and then an investment in high-quality curriculum materials and ensuring that those materials come in both English and Spanish, because many of our multilingual learners do speak Spanish at home. And what we're excited about is that we've seen that translate into better outcomes for students, particularly our multilingual learners. So what you'll see is that of the students who recently exited MLL status, 27.5% were enriched in RICAS ELA, 19.7% in RICAS math, which outperforms the entire general student body. So we feel like many of those investments we're making are starting to see results. On the teacher side, it's allowed us to surpass our TAP target of teachers holding their ESL and bilingual language certification. The target, I believe, was 35%, and we are at 40%. So, again, many things we can continue to improve on and much room to grow. But this was a way we tried to be smart about our budget, not just adding, making difficult trade-offs aligned to where we're going with our journey. We transition to our revenue. So, keep in the back of your mind that standard cost growth of $8 to $13 million, the unique challenges we're facing this year with student aid. And what you'll see here is our state aid for FY24. And again, state aid is roughly 2/3 of our local aid. And most of that, let's see, over 90%, or 96%, excuse me, is funding formula aid. And that's driven by total enrollment and the percent of students experiencing poverty. It's pretty formulaic, and we can predict it over time. Where the smaller portion here is not really locked in and can change year to year a little bit less predictably, but it is our categorical aid. So that includes a categorical aid for multilingual learner students and other special populations. We did see a pretty significant increase, thankfully, from the state in terms of multilingual learner categorical this past year, which allowed kind of soften the declines we'd seen on the other side of state aid. So, and Chris can correct me, but when we looked historically, the growth in state aid has been somewhere between $8 to $10 million. Though the past few years it's actually declined. That's in part due to the declines we've seen. But again, things like the categorical funding, things like the transition fund that the legislature put in place, soften that decline for us for this past year. On the city aid side, so as a reminder, this is roughly a third of the district aid. What see here are aid is paid over time. And as a reminder, city aid, two things I'll call out. City aid under the Crowley Act requires that local municipalities increase their contribution to the school system by the same percentage as the state total school aid is increased. So if the state aid to schools goes up by 2%, then that's what the city aid should track with. And we have not been necessarily receiving funding at these levels. The second thing I'll mention is that the city aid is there to cover aid for all students of Providence, both those who attend district schools, but also charter schools. So while we receive the applications for city aid, we then pass through a portion of that based on the number of pupils in charter schools, the net babies, and our CTE Met. So it's really intended to fund all students of Providence, not just those in the BSD. But what you'll see here in blue is what the statute would require. So you see it moving up each year. What you see in orange has been what the city has included in their budget each fiscal year. And then what you'll see in gray, at least for 21, 22, 23, are what we've actually received, with 24 being what's in our proposed budget. So in each of those, in 21, 22, and 23, we went into litigation with the city and ultimately reached a settlement that yielded the numbers you see there. And we are once again with them to determine our aid. So plenty to talk about through here. I think one takeaway is that it can make planning unpredictable. And if you just look at FY24, the task is to plan a budget for either 155 or 130, and doing it either way, I think it's probably not the right way to do it. So this has made for some challenging planning over the past few years. And we're hopeful with this new administration we'll be able to reach some more consistency, but it has been a challenge. Just have 2 more slides, and then I certainly want to open up for questions. So like I said, we're early on in this process. So what I want to talk through is a little bit of like big picture, how we're thinking through this. And then the kind of like timeline about what comes ahead. So really what we're looking at now is like preliminarily are of those investments we made through ESSER or other funding sources, what are those that we have seen results with and want to continue? So this past year we've added schools, added behavior interventionists. Those are individuals who are specially trained to work on supporting students with their behavior. So identifying investments like that about what we've seen results in what we want to continue. We also want to continue the use of student-based budgeting that allows our school leaders to work with their school communities to identify those items that are making some of those decisions that are closest to our students. At the same time, we'll also need to identify areas for potential cost savings. And so, as we look at those, several that initially come to mind are, obviously, as I mentioned, much of our budget is in staff, so looking at potential reductions in central office or school support staff. Potential for sharing resources across smaller schools for electives, as well as efficiencies in transportation. That's one of our major cost drivers in the district. We will also continue to look for areas for increased revenue. So that is one, ensuring adequate funding from local funding sources and that predictability of city revenue that I mentioned, while also identifying other grants and things that can support the work we've done. So you actually heard about one earlier tonight around leadership development, but there's also one again Sam you can speak to around community schools that might support some of the investments we've done to date around social emotional learning and student supports. So I'll close by sharing. What we'll see here are we're really in this first box, initial data gathering and projections. So you start to get better sense of enrollment in October. We'll look at early revenue projections and expense growth. A few of the things we highlighted, like special ed out of district placements, are what we are starting to see as potential pressures and areas for growth for next year. Then it's moving towards when we ship budget packages out to schools in the winter. working with them about where school level decisions they are looking to make after those district level decisions on allocations that they made. Schools will then, in between January and March, begin to draft and detailed budgets, and then in the spring, we will finalize budget as we normally do with you. I think what will likely be different this year is we're probably doing a lot more early information sharing and planning just to update progress. I think we know how important transparency is here, and so we'll be find ways to communicate with this this forum, but in other ones as well, to share information as we go through the process. So lots of information, but happy to answer questions about specific slides or about.
Thank you so much. Mr. Welcome.
Apologize for being late.
We went through the other items. All right, so what are questions?
Yeah, do we have a plan yet as it pertains to as actually runs out? Do we have a plan? 'Cause I know there's a lot of social workers, different staff in the district that's under that funding. It's just going to be a bunch of layoffs, or are we trying to plan to put some of these positions into the fiscal budget?
So that's what we're going through now. So I'll say there are certainly things that we have always known would sunset. So we've done some one-time technology purchases and things like that. And I think 90% of our ESSER spending has not been on people positions. So much of it we had planned for. For the remaining part, we're going through the exercise now of saying, when we look at what are our revenues and what are our expenses look like next year, ESSER aside, and then here are the 2 or 3 things that we want to keep and maintain. How does that then add to the reductions we potentially need to do? So what we're thinking, the way we're thinking about it is not to say if it's on ESSER, it is going away, because there's plenty on ESSER that might be worth continuing. It just might mean more reductions we would have to make to other programs or existing things. So we do not have a plan yet in place. That is the process we are going through now to develop that plan.
So you do have an exact date, not to put pressure on them, but an exact date when that plan was sort of be able to come out, so people will be able to plan in advance.
Yeah, so a couple big milestones that I would say is obviously on the tail end, our budget is final in June. We'll obviously have it all before then. I think part of the reason is between now and March, we have several things happen. So we get updated budget figures from the governor based on enrollment, based on his government budget request in February and March. So what that means is between now and June, our budget gets more certain. So typically by March is when, if there are staffing implications, we're going to need to displace staff or lay off staff. Those like the first time that happens is in March. So between now and then we start getting, as we get a better sense of our revenue and expense projections for next year, we'll start to narrow down what the potential plan is to close that gap. But I would say, most certainty in June. I do think we have to start making personnel decisions in March, because that's when we've typically done that with most other positions.
One question in regards to the slide for expenses and cuts to the key service contracts for transportation, and how you're identifying potential areas for cost saving and efficiencies of transportation. I know there's been some challenges around that, especially with VICTA and all the other bus contracts, whatever. So can we identify how we might try to do so?
Yeah, let me give you 2 concrete examples of things we've considered, and we're actually working to get a sense of the rough, how much potential savings there are there. But the first is, it pains me to say it because we've done it, it's a painful process, but it's changing developers. So we have I'll try to do this. I know. So let me explain how that, like roughly how it works. We have a portion of our schools start at 8 o'clock, a portion of our schools start at 9 o'clock. And in an efficient system, you have the same number of trips to sort of the 8 a.m. schools as the 9 a.m. schools. So if you have 10 buses working at 8 a.m., you can then do 10 runs and pick up more kids between 8 and 9. But when those come out of balance, right? So let's say you have 20 total trips, but instead of being 10 and 10, the first tier has 15 buses, and you're only having to do 4 or 5 trips for the second tier. You still need 15 buses, right? So there's 5 buses that are inefficient, right? So we will, one step is to look at some of our belt times to see, are there any changes that can minimize that unbalancing between the tiers? Because as painful as belt times it is, and because of COVID and other things, we've done it more times than I'd like to remember. It is of other decisions of laying off staff and other things. It's frankly a lot more tolerable and less impact on students than but not saying it's easy by any means, but at the scale of other events. The other one that is challenging in different ways is we are obligated under state law to transport private workers. So Catholic schools, private schools in the district, which is the state law, and we do follow it. But one of the challenges, their bell times don't always align with our bell times, right? So they might start, we start at 8 and 9, they might start at 8:30, which means instead of having a bus that could serve 2 schools, they could only serve 1 school, which creates challenges. So obviously it's a sensitive topic, and I think we want to discuss it, but there are other districts that have taken steps to work with those schools to potentially drop students off. Either they could adjust their times, or they could drop students off earlier and have adults there. Yeah, so that again, we don't want to be too disruptive, but again, that's an opportunity where we, instead of having, we could potentially save a bus, and each bus is roughly $70,000 over the course of the year. So those are 2 areas we're thinking about, but we're also seeing if there are other opportunities for reductions in transportation expenses.
Thank you so much. I have a few questions. I'm a little bit concerned about the reducing the teaching position. As it stands right now, we know that we're not 100% staffing. Is that right? Or
That's accurate.
so when we are not having enough teachers in the room, we're thinking that the way to, push back is to reduce it further. What do you think we can achieve with that?
So what we had here was slide 7 was backwards looking. So this is what we've already done. And I'll give you an example. I'm not a scheduling expert, but many of our high schools had been scheduled where they had a teacher would have a course load of 7. There would be 7 periods, but they would only be programmed for 5 rather than 6. And when you do that, it ends up actually creating the need for more teachers. And frankly, it ends up adding teachers who then, for content teacher, who might teach an extra elective, which is fine. But what you do then is you actually, not only is there a financial impact, but at the same time we're struggling to find math and science and ELA teachers are actually creating more positions that you then have to fill. So if done right, you can actually reduce your expenditures, but also make it so that in a tight labor market, you aren't having to, there are less positions you need to fill. So this was the 60 years work that's been done already. I think we've done a lot of the scheduling changes at the secondary level. Like I think there may not be additional changes to do there, aside that are maybe some of our middle schools. But scheduling, as I've learned, has a huge impact not just on the financials of the district, but also the time students have in courthouse.
I just want us to be, think about the efficiency of having quality education for students and classrooms. Because if we, reduce the capacity of what we don't have for time, that's one of the reasons why we're not at where we're going to be. So when we're looking at that, we should put that into consideration. The other question I want to ask is, when are you in the superintendent's planning to start letting the city council and the state government, right, know that this is a potential issue? Because I like that we're starting it on time. But at the same time, we're thinking about it and we're not letting where we're going to be getting money, especially when we see some kind of unpredictable. I mean, you know, like it's not consistent. But we don't need that inconsistency. That's what we achieve what we want to achieve, because we want to deliver quality for our students. When do you want to start this conversation with the city council? We're having some issues, and so that we will know this is a problem, and we can look at, okay, how can we address it? When do you plan to?
Coincidentally, we'll be in front of City Council Finance next Tuesday. And the main topic is actually this fiscal year. But we'll share a lot of this information we're sharing today. We've been scheduled in June and then July to present on we did the presentation in June, spring on our FY24 budget. After we meet with you, we then would typically meet with City Council. We've been scheduled. Unfortunately, you may have seen that the chair, the finance chair, was injured. It was out of state for a while, so she is now back. So we finally been rescheduled. But we will be there on Tuesday, and while the focus on FY24, we'll spend a lot of time talking about city aid, but also sharing finance and but frankly, like this is a kind of this meeting is a little bit of a kickoff of communication we'll be doing with city council, but also with our
I hope that when we have such meetings and we have that opportunity, we'll bring this to their attention so that they know the vulnerabilities that we're facing, so that at least we can, you know, things. So planning this is good and ahead of time, so keep us posted so that we know where we are. Third question I'd like to ask is, have you exhausted all grant local funding, people that can give us money that can, have we exhausted that? Do we have, I know part of our top thing is looking for how we can increase revenue, but are we doing that? Do we have a special department that is working on that, looking into what can we get, how can we raise more money? What's the update on that?
Yeah, I would say we with the TNT or the TISL grant, the school community grant, we've gone after some big ones, but by no means when I say we've exhausted it. We do have it's a little bit of a plug, but we do have a grant writer position available that we're looking to have. It's been vacant for quite some time. It was it's been vacant for a bit, but we reposted it because even though at the time we might make difficult personnel decisions, it's a time that we want to be active. So if people know strong candidates for that, we would certainly welcome it. But that is another angle aside from reductions. It's identifying other grants and things.
And I think that is very, very important. We need to start working on that. And I think there's a program with the governor's office where you can get grant writers for that for free. So instead of looking for a position that we're going to fill out to cost us money, how about we explore if we can have that opportunity? If we need that connection, if we need that number, maybe I can give it to them because I know they have programs. So if they can affect it on individuals, I think this is very important business in the state. So if we can get it free, let's go for it. So we don't have to fill a position and be looking for who's going to fill it, maybe $100,000. But if we can get something free, or maybe like, okay, we get the facility. I think if we tap on that resources, and I can, incorporate it. So please let us use that. So we don't have to still we're looking for the grant writer. We really, really need to start it now, based on what you're just telling us right now. Because the first paragraph of this simply got me, concerned. We're uniquely challenging. So let us face the challenges. let us explore the opportunities. Let us look at how to get more money so that at least that will take out some things that we do. And I know there are out there. It's just like we just need to push the button more and explore it more.
What's the name of the grants that these teams working on there?
There's this, community school.
Community grant, federal grant, I think it's right to school office. 10 million. It's a lot.
Is there an update on that?
I think it's still under review on DOE.
Full service community schools. I think I see you when, like it.
Yes,
I don't know if I've seen when they're gonna get back. Sometimes they don't respond exactly.
And I think also we can start from around the community. There are some things that are willing to do. I don't know. We used to have like a ground university with sponsoring some programs and lots of things to us. I would still exploring that.
I mean, I know there's like one-off connections with schools, but I actually don't know what the connect to like.
Because in this situation, when government funding is increasing, and we have to find ways of continuing and doing what we have to do. So, when do we expect to have a next round of discussion on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, we can go back to quarter one projections in December. Yeah. So we can provide maybe we can provide quarter one updates for this current fiscal year. At the same time, just it might not be a presentation, but we can give you updates. I think that there'll be like every couple months it will be like a more formal presentation, but we can have that give you a status check of where we're tracking.
Is there a federal government grant for this new command thing that just coming?
I have not seen it. I've seen like there's a lot about social emotional learning, that type of supports, but I've not seen something specific.
So, thank you so much for coming up and seeing us. You have a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Any abstention? Thank you so much.
I know, I'm gonna say that, I'm gonna do that. Appreciate it. Yeah, you have to like the pop.
Oh my God, yes.
Such a mess for you, I know, man.